Good evening, joyful Christian Mystic Hermit. Um, I had some comments from one of our viewers, Irene, and she had heard and had read some about this woman, Christina, who was a mystic and who levitated a lot, different, unusual levitation up to the rafters of the church and things. And I said, well, could it be this Christina Mirabilis? Because I've had this little pamphlet out. It's an interesting what connects, when we're letting God lead our lives. So this is by Thomas de Contempra, contemporary times or something. I'm not sure what that is. I know Carol would know what that French last name means. Cantampra. So, translated with introduction and notes by Margot H. King. And I had started reading it at one point, but didn't get far. And it was before the arachnoiditis I have had advanced enough that the pain interferes with comprehension, staying with me. It's a strange, my brain just feels very strange I barely remember how it used to be, but I used to just be able to remember all these details of whatever I read and wouldn't need to take copious notes, but I'm going to have to take notes with this because it's going to be more than the little bit I found online. And this was written 8 years after she died. And another little pamphlet I have, though, but that I packed away. Another person wrote about another mystic, Marie d'Oignes, and Oignes. And so that will be interesting. And they're connected because the biographies of them were written by people, contemporaries of their time period. Not that they were connected or, all that much. But I'm going to just do a little brief overview of Christina before I'll dig into the weeds there and read that and try to take notes on things. It'll take me a while. I'm slow. And I haven't done any work. I got my overalls on, and then I did a load of laundry this morning, and I noticed a tissue on top as I had the water filled in the tank and a tissue there, and I grabbed it. And I double checked, not well enough. There was still one in there. So tomorrow I will be picking lint off. I'll try vacuuming maybe. I think I have one of those roller things, tape rollers. But, there I should have looked better. Of course, things were wet. I should have taken them all out, just sopping, and found that other tissue. Because I have them, I have such sinuses that I always have tissues around. So something got in the wash, so I have quite a mess. It's all hung drip drying. I drip dry my stuff. Probably had I dried them, but my clothes last longer if I drip dry them. I've had my clothes for 20 to 25 years, and I don't intend to ever have to buy any more. So I've got my purples for Advent and Lent and my other liturgical season colors that I add in here and there. My pain doctor noticed the purple, including my purple hat that my daughter knit for me a few years ago. I love it. And I thought I'd lost that this morning. I thought I'd left it maybe at the doctor's office. No, it was here. I'm just daft. I'm extra daft right now. But I told my pain doctor, we haven't had our good talks like we used to of quote unquote religion or whatever, spirituality, more religion. He's more temporally locust. He's Presbyterian and very anti-Catholic, but is convinced I'm not really Catholic because I don't worship Mary. I don't worship the Pope. I guess I don't have a ring in my nose and being, pulled along with odd teachings and not Bible oriented and not Christian. But he was showing me a site online he's intrigued with that has to do with archaeology and different things that were found that substantiate going back in the Old Testament and the Bible and helps explain more. So that was interesting. But he noticed the purple, and I told him, well, it's Advent. We had talked about Advent a year ago. I think that was the last time we had a really nice conversation. And Lent, too. Maybe it was Lent, I think. Yeah. And also, maybe both. But it was a good conversation. We enjoyed it. But he wasn't at all clued in on purple as the color for Advent and Lent. Now, Lent, it's supposed to be a darker and more blackish purple. And I have my Gaudete Sunday sweater. I have a couple of them, sort of more of an orchid or a mauve color. The one's more of a mauve color. Actually, I used to have a really mauve color, but I don't know. Oh, some things got lost in the move. I don't know how. I think something got put in the truck to go to the dump. More than a bag, but of items, and maybe on purpose. But we'll not go further with that. Things were being said and mocked and all that. So at the time when I moved from the island, and things had been stored all that time too. So maybe it was total accident, but I think the true mauve is going. I told my paint doctor, says, "Oh, I'm into it. I'm into Lent. I'm into all aspects of quote unquote religion," because he says, "Oh, let's not call it religion." And he never really came up with the term, but and I know he wouldn't like spiritual. Spiritual can get loosey goosey with some people, not with him. It wouldn't at all. He's very Orthodox type Presbyterian. So, but anyway, I like all these things, and so now I've got to pick Lent off of some purple too. And and then I wrote to the bishop here, but I don't think I'm going to send it. If I do, I have to really edit it out. But after I'd been writing probably for 2 hours, and I go just really fast, and I can hardly see up my glasses. I had a hard time getting the print bigger on the laptop, and so I got all done, and I just felt so good. I was writing about God and about all kinds of things, spiritual matters, and I just felt like I couldn't wait to die for heaven. I thought this is how it would be all the time, just being able to be immersed. I was immersed in what I was writing. And it's some of the stuff I go on about, but I love it. I said, "Oh Lord, I just love writing about you, or thoughts about you, or the church, all the wonderful experiences of the Mass." I'm not talking about mystical experiences. I'm just talking about being there and being part of it, and the glory of the Mass, and the beauty, and even the beauty of the buildings, and the beautiful statues. Here I have Our Lady of Solitude right here. And just, the liturgy, the history, the tradition, it all redounds to Christ. It all redounds to worship and to the spiritual life. Even though, yes, we can. Any one of us can get too into the temporal and then not not make the leap, not go over the bridge to the spiritual. So that's what, I think somebody like Christina Mirabilis was able to do, and still is. This little pamphlet, I didn't have an easy time finding it, but it's, who knows, it might even be online now. I bought all these rare books and then the internet comes along, and I'm glad that it did, but it sort of took away from my library investment some, but okay. So I want to share some about Christina. Let me get to the, let me get this correct. Let me get it to a spot. I don't want to have, okay, here we go. She's also known as Christina the Astonishing. So I wasn't familiar with Christina Astonishing, but I've had this little pamphlet for years that I have so many books of the life of Christina Mirabilis. And she was born in 1150. Now they're thinking maybe it was 1170 that she was born. More research has come up about her, but she died on July 24th, 1224. So she was maybe 48 years old approximately. She was a holy woman born in Brustem in Belgium, near a place called Sint Truden. But the actual name of her little village was Brustem, Belgium. Christina is primarily known for her legendary resurrection during her funeral mass. She rose up during her funeral mass. And numerous other miracles attributed to her life. So Thomas Cantampre wrote a hagiography, writings of a saint, and rather embellished, really in detail of what they saw at that time of her, knew of her. They were based on accounts from people who knew her. This little booklet is, and which made her known outside of St. Truden. St. Truden, it would mean. So, she was not considered a saint she was considered a saint in her own time, but she's never been approved by the church or canonized or anything. But the church recognizes her as having unusual experiences. And she's been called a saint for centuries by people who knew her and then people who heard of her long after she had died, centuries later. But she's never been put through any process. Her miracles weren't validated, centuries later through any kind of factual details. It's just word of mouth, how it used to be. And people also, they sure knew if it was a false mystic too. They would go after the person, not not harm them or anything, but they could see through, and they weren't having any of it. They didn't want any frauds. So, says, noted by her appearance in the Fasti Mariani calendar of saints in 1630, and the lives of the saints, Butler's lives, in the 18th century, though never formally canonized, Christina is commemorated in the current edition of the Roman Martyrology. And her feast day is the 24th of July, the day of her death. The day of her death in 1224. That would make her about 44 years old if she was born in 1170, as opposed to 1150. I don't think she was born in 1150. I read that they were back and forth on it, but pretty much in doing research thought she was, in other people doing research around the time or after that, and left word on it. So she was born to a religious family, and the youngest of three daughters. I was the youngest of three daughters. It's fun reading about these people to make connection with them, because they become my friends. They're your friends now. So I can tell Christina, oh, I know what it was like to be a youngest daughter, youngest of three daughters. And I think LS, she had sisters. Don't think there were any brothers in her family. I think there were three girls, but I don't know if she was youngest or middle child or what. But it's just sort of fun, I think, to get to know these people and learn from them. So her life, let's see, let me get this a little bigger so I'm not, but she was orphaned at the age of 15. Her parents died, both of her parents died by the time she was 15. So she worked taking the herds to pasture. She suffered a massive seizure when she was in her early 20s. Now this is where the discrepancy comes. Some think that she was 12 years old when she had this seizure and essentially died. So, Christina, though, that go with this, what this research says here, that she had a massive seizure when she was in her early 20s. Her condition was so severe that witnesses assumed she had died. A funeral was held, but during the service, Christina arose. She rose full of vigor from her coffin, stupefying with amazement the whole city who came. Well, of course, a city back then wasn't very big, but it was the city of Saint Truden, which had witnessed this wonder. She levitated up to the rafters, explaining that she could not bear the smell of the sinful people that had come around down below, come to her funeral mass. And I found that interesting. I mean, I didn't go up to the rafters or anything, but when I was in that ecstasy at Mass, any Mass, from end of August 2008, well, it didn't get really stronger, progress. This ecstasy didn't until maybe by mid to end of October. But I would be in the handicap pew, out, in this ecstasy. And then these, as if just deeply, deeply asleep or dead practically. It's like you lose all your faculties, you're just gone. You can't move, but you can still, if something icky's going on around, you can become aware of it, and it draws you in from God. And, away from God into the temporal. Like if people coming up for communion, they'd walk by the handicap pew where I'd be plopped and other people would be sitting, but I would be, unable to move and sort of dead, really unable to function. But they would come by, and I could smell souls when I was in that capacity of ecstasy. And this reminded me of that. A beautiful small soul. Oh, the perfume scent. It was incredibly beautiful. But if it were a sin, really a bad sin person, or the devil was in them, I would smell the devil stench as they'd walk by, going up to receive communion. And that was quite something, to be in union with God in an ecstasy during communion time at Mass, unable to move or speak or anything of that sort, but yet sense someone coming from behind up to receive communion who had a really bad, a really evil presence. And it would literally stink. And what I didn't like about it is that it took me away from God during Mass, and I didn't like that. I didn't want to be distracted. I wanted to be left alone in that ecstasy where the temporal couldn't touch me, where I was protected from realizing good souls or bad. You don't want it, you just want to be with God. So, but I think, so I understand. I mean, I believe that Christina, that the stench of some of the souls, the evil, the devil in them, some of them, the ones who chose some pretty nasty sins, that caused her to have to get away from them. So she had mystical gifts. She had spiritual gifts. We can call them that. Maybe that's better to call them spiritual gifts from God, because anyone can have them. And they, like these mystics, they are spiritual people. They don't have the same kind all the time, or the same as everybody else. And we've already talked about why God would have that happen to someone, especially in public or especially at Mass. It's a reminder, in simple terms, that God's in charge. It's a help in some way to someone there. It has usually a message to it of some sort, either one that you figure out yourselves. Once you figure out that something's happening to someone in your midst, or the person understands, and if possible, then we'll try to explain it later to the priest or the bishop. And but if they otherwise, though, they often will just put the person through the grinder and get more caught up in, well, what's happening, and is this valid or not? Or is this person making that happen? Is she faking it, or he faking it? And they sometimes will get so wrapped up in that they miss a message from God, or the point for themselves, really. Other people may. Like this one man, this couple, they were such good friends. I thought close, but it ended up, I don't think so. When I moved, that was pretty much it, which I wasn't expecting. I thought we would remain spiritual friends and communicate, But he had told me how at first he was really put out and envious. He admitted, he says, I was so envious. And he says, but then I saw just how awful it was for you and how you were being mistreated. And I realized, and he said, I realized it. Don't wish for it, don't wish for it. But he says, I still wish that I could experience it just one time, what you experienced. So that was later on, and I did try to explain to him what it was like. But also, it is hard on the human body in some ways. You're protected by God. But Teresa of Avila was in an extended period of collapse with ecstasy with it. And she realized at one point that if she didn't pull out of it, it was going to end up harming her body, killing her. Because your whole system shuts down. Basically, barely a heart rate, barely breathing. You really don't need to breathe. You're not here. And then the agony when, like, a bad soul is in the vicinity, and the smell of it, the devil stench, I call it the devil stench. It's just a very specific, particular smell. And a tangible smell to the person who's not in a tangible mode, so I don't know if it really is something that the outer senses would smell. But with Christina, she did. She could, even in her out of ecstasy or waking moments, she could smell bad souls. I tend to just sense them. I sense something not good. And that's also with spaces too. Houses, for example, or like this one has been the most peaceful and delightful. Even when I first moved in, it was just very, very comforting, peaceful, delightful, and it was awful looking, so it wasn't by any aesthetic means any of the beauty, or it was really ugly. Bright pink carpet and bright teal green carpet and hot pink walls, and otherwise with the teal carpet, then they also had this sort of peachy yellow or sandy peachy wall paint, and upstairs was the hot pink bedroom with the hot pink carpet. So it was, and not many windows, hardly any windows for the beautiful view. I think in a nice way though, the man was into preservation of heat and keep things very energy efficient by having it very dark in here and not being able to enjoy the view. So that I just put out money for better quality windows, higher E rating windows. So you don't have to worry about putting up metallic film on the outside that makes the inside of the room have a green yellow cast to it all the time, sort of an olive green. It's like at first it's like just having Polaroid sunglasses on all the time while you're inside your house. So it's that effect. But yeah, so Christina could sense those things, and ultimately, ideally, then you start praying for the person. You start beseeching God for their souls to be rid of the devil. So that there's just any of these spiritual experiences that you may have. It can be something that isn't even noticed, but you know it. If it's from God, it will have a good to it. Always will have a good. And there won't be any spiritual bad to it. But there may be, and likely will be, negative reactions from people or from clergy for various reasons that we've sort of mentioned: the envy, the resentment they wish they had, or the sense of, I'm this, and how is this nothing woman having this experience? Why not me? I deserve it. Or just a deep conviction and desire to prove it wrong, and get the person out. They're an aberration. They're an out of order thing. They're creating something is not in order there, per their perception and need for temporal order. Like I couldn't stand at the gospel. That really got to the Monsignor. So, and others, who knows what all their reasons for, wanting me out. It's just word spread, I guess, or maybe the rector, maybe the chancellor. He was also chancellor and vicar general. All the priests, he might have put the kiss of death out on me. The one that didn't want me in any parishes, didn't want me going to mass. Oh, sort of interesting, isn't it, though, how it works? And you can't take offense. I mean, but I kept thinking, that God kept wanting me at Mass, but no, he didn't. He wanted me to be of the traditional, historic desert hermits, the hermits of yore, the ones that went out and were hermits, didn't need approval of a bishop, didn't need to be consecrated by a human being, and or have a church law, to confirm that they are a hermit. It isn't that much. It's not. It's your way. It's a way of life. It's a way of coming to God, of having more time for God alone. It's a protection from the world, from the temporal world, to actually be a hermit. But if you're a canon law hermit, you're just right in the middle of it all, the middle of the church world anyway, and are known and stand out all the more. So it's something to think through. But so in this seizure that she had, it seemed like she was dead. They thought she'd died. Couldn't get a heart rate. I told you about that one doctor who had, he told my friends he was a doctor after Mass, I guess, and he had really dug right into my neck. I could tell someone who knew what he was doing was messing with me. That was for sure. And it drew me back in. I didn't like that. I wasn't conscious totally. I mean, I was aware. I wasn't back in the here and now. I was like halfway. And you don't like that. You don't want to be taken away from God like that. So I didn't like it. I wanted him to go away, go away. I couldn't move. I couldn't say anything. But he couldn't find a pulse in my jugular veins. And he was getting very concerned. So these people told me later that they told him, it's okay. She's having a spiritual event. And so that fastened the science in him, though. And he was a devout Catholic, as it turned out, visiting from somewhere. And so, but, if a doctor can't find the heartbeat at all, that you have to understand the body is practically dead, but alive. God keeps you alive. So that's how it was that people thought she was dead. This was back in the 1200s, early 1200s. So they prepared her for, a funeral. They had a funeral mass for her. The funeral was held. During the service, she arose full upright with vigor, and stupefied, as it said, the whole city, who had witnessed how she was dead one minute and the next quite alive and sitting up in her coffin. But she levitated up to the rafters because she had been so purified in her ecstasy, her extended ecstasy, near-death experience it was, really was a near-death experience. She had a seizure. They thought she probably had epilepsy later. That's what they think was her ailment, was epilepsy, and it happened at that point, a bad seizure. So she had what you would call now a near-death experience. I call it a death experience if you're dead. If you're like me, I was dead. I wasn't just about dead. I was dead and I was gone. And the nurses knew, and they were panicking. And then I did come back in a couple of times. This was back in 1987. So she related to the people that she had witnessed heaven, hell, and purgatory. And I think it's lovely that she was free to even explain these things. They weren't as uptight back then about keeping everything controlled and so worried that it's fake or the person is fake, or worried that things are going to get out of control with people. And they're gonna what? What are they gonna do? How would people get out of control? Would they start thinking the person's holier than normal people? Maybe they'd do that, but they're not. The person isn't. They just had an experience, like she had this experience, this near-death experience. But what God showed her in her death experience was profoundly religious. Profound, showed her heaven, hell, and purgatory. And seeing that really altered the rest of her life. Having that death experience really altered her. And that was a good thing. She became very, very intent on pleasing God. And that's how we all should be. And probably people who witnessed her really striving she wanted to make reparation for those people she saw in hell and in purgatory. She started doing all kinds of penances. So she says here, angels conducted her first to a very dark, gloomy place, entirely filled with souls enduring such torments that it was impossible to describe them. She claimed that she had been offered a choice of either remaining in heaven or returning to earth to perform penance in order to deliver souls from the flames of purgatory. Christina agreed to return to life, and in that instant stood up. She told those around her that she had returned to life for the sole purpose of bringing relief to the departed and conversion of sinners. Conversion to sinners. She wanted sinners to convert, draw close to God, change their ways. She told to the people right there. I don't know if that was when she was up in the rafters or before she went up or when she came back down. But at some point in time, she had to come back down, stench or not stench. But you can imagine, being in such a purified environment with angels and having died and not having your physical body, being out of your body, that coming back, the world, especially in that time period, when people didn't shower or bathe, and people would have some of the they didn't have the detectives and the FBI or whatever, FBI in the United States to handle federal crimes, and all these detectives and DNA and all. There were sinners who were criminals who would be at Mass, who had done terrible things, and their souls would be horribly stinky, devil stench. Or people who had, there wasn't social media, there weren't television. It wasn't as if people could be found out as easily if they were committing adultery. Think how much it's easier to sin then, in a way, in some ways. So it was quite a shock for her to have to deal with that. So she really went totally all for God, omnia pro Deo. That experience shook her, being shown those things. So she renounced all of life's comforts, reduced herself to extreme destitution, dressed in rags, lived without home or hearth, gave up every comfort, and did not content with those privations, eagerly sought out, and not content with these privations that she sought others that would cause her even greater suffering. She sought suffering. She went after it, and she caused herself suffering. Now, this was back in the, what would that be, the mid-Middle Ages to early Middle Ages, early 1200s. And now, like my spiritual father told me, Don't put yourself in any harm's way. Do not do anything that is going to cause you to suffer. Don't fast. He told me, don't, if don't fast on things that aren't going to hurt your body, in other words. Fast from bad habits or bad thoughts or vices that you have. Fast from those. Work on those. But don't allow yourself, don't make your house extra cold so that you get sick. He says God has already given you so much suffering. He's letting you know he'll handle the suffering. He'll give you everything you need to get you purified. And as we would say it, to get us to the point where we love as God loves, with pure love. God will arrange for us if we have that desire, and tell him, ask him, please help me. I want to be purified. I want to learn to love like you love, God, with pure love, with your pure love. Not anything human of it, but God's pure love. That's what we're striving for. That's why we're here, is to learn to love as God loves, to love God above all things, to love others as God loves, and to love ourselves as God loves us, with this purity of love. And in doing so, we will come to know God purely as love, because God is pure love. That's what God is. So we'll come to know God intimately by learning his love. That's equivalent to learning God, because God is love. So in our times, we've evolved and priests have also, as far as what is necessary and what is not. In faith, God will provide us with whatever situations, with whatever privations, with whatever lessons in suffering or other aspects that he can teach us these things, rather than to do some of the things she did. But her intentions were well intended. She wanted to make reparation. Now, had she been in another time period and had my spiritual father, she would have had surgery. She would have had situations in which she should have died. She would have had ER doctors reading something that the EMS guys put down that I found out was totally wrong. They had my pain med so high, no one would be on that amount. No normal, good grief. And they wouldn't listen to me. So see, that was a suffering, as it turned out. And God wanted it, though, so that by rights I should have been dead. I had septic shock, and they were Narcaning me, not once but twice, which is terribly hard on the body. I went unconscious before I started having seizures. Thanks be to God, he didn't have me experience that consciously. But twice they did it. They wasted a couple hours. And that itself could have killed me. There I had septic shock, and they were piddling around, Narcaning me, convinced that I was loaded with narcotics, based on what EMS people had written of 6 times the amount of my low dose medication, extended release. One little pill every 12 hours for 2.5 years. So, it just, see, God allowed that. That was a sign to me that I lived, and then they worked on me like 14 hours just to keep me alive, to get me to live. That that God wanted me to make a big change in my life. I knew it. I still know it. And I was still piddling around. Think I am so not going to be doing much manual labor. Although I'm praying about it because I don't want to, I have to trust God. I don't want to go weird. It's good to have balance, but when I realized, just even looking up different things and writing to the bishop about all the different thoughts and different realities, I just love writing and thinking about God. And I was miles away, or eons away, dimensions away from my painful body all afternoon and into the evening, except for the times I would go out with the doggies and walk around with them, give them a little treat. Oh, they need some attention, but they love hanging out. Of course, they like being on the bed, resting too. It's cozy. It's cold outside now, but then I think, well, I'll decline, or I'll get really. I mean, I could just get gonzo on God, just really, and it felt like heaven. It felt like this is what heaven will be. It'll just be God all the time, and with God, in God, through God. Everyone will be discussing God. Everybody will love all aspects of God and the spiritual life, and there'll be angels, and there'll be all these holy ones there, and to talk with, to flash, thought flash, and people to help, and the help will be efficient, that we're able to give others, and they us, as far as help, as in, if I'm in purgatory, progression, I like to call it, further progression, just all the learning and the insights that will, oh yes, I get it now. It'll just be, can you just imagine what that is? And no suffering. We won't suffer our bodily pains. So it's just a major temptation for me to tell the daughter, put out the word around your work area. Anyone who has contacts, I'll just spend what's left and get this finished, and I can just delight in the Lord day and night. Write things that I won't mail or won't send, but still, I was in it. I was in it and pouring it out, and don't even remember what all I wrote. That's, it doesn't matter. It was heaven. So, and then finding this woman, I think when I read this book, there'll be more meat to it. See, it's these unusual experiences that draw people, but there's so much more. I want to get to what's more, so that we'll know we can shortcut. We don't need the experiences unless God really thinks we do. And God doesn't think most people need them, because we don't have them often or at all. That's part of it. God knows what we need. And if we can absorb and learn what God's trying to teach us without God having to have some fantastical experience occur, great. That's efficient. That's good. So, with her suffering, at first she fled human contact and she was suspected of being possessed. She was jailed also. She was jailed. And upon her release, she took up the practice of extreme penance, extreme. extreme. Thomas Competri, he wrote this 8 years after she died. But here's St. Robert Bellarmine wrote this: God willed to silence those libertines who make open profession of believing in nothing and who have this audacity to ask in scorn, who has returned from the other world? Who has ever seen the torments of hell or purgatory? Behold the witnesses. They assure us that they have seen them and that they are dreadful. What follows then, if not the incredulous, is inexcusable, and that those who believe and nevertheless neglect to do penance are still more to be condemned. So there's a real connection here, though, also, that God touches us with his supernatural reality and wants a reaction. It's cause and effect. If we're just going to go, oh, wow, that was so awesome. Gosh, I wonder if I can replicate it. Let me try to replicate that feeling or that experience, because I want to experience that again. Then the buzzer's going to ring. Bong, wrong answer. If, like Christina or others, you get this incredible desire to help, do reparation for the ones in purgatory who you saw suffering, or desire to express to people what you learned about the Mass, or whatever it was that you benefit, or what it was like to die, and not to worry about it, not to fear it, and to know that everything goes with you but your sick and cumbrous and painful body, awkward and in the way, with all of its effects that need to be kept up, and effort, take care of your brain, take care of your lungs, take care of your heart, take care of your legs and your arms and your hands, and on and on. It's a lot of responsibility. Without it, that just opens up a whole section of what we can be doing for God in heaven. See, but to change as a result of the spiritual experience he's given us or given Christina that we read about or hear about. See, that should cause a reaction in us also. Lord, what can I do to help you in your work? Jesus, what can I do? Virgin Mary, let me be your maidservant. I want to help your work with Jesus. I want to help. I want to change. I want to learn to love as God loves. I want to be in heaven. I want to be good, and I want to stop sinning on this and this and that. Or to catch my sins as soon as I do them and beg forgiveness and make amends. See, these experiences happen to others or to yourself for change, as a stimulus to do better and to take it seriously too. To realize God is real. That's another thing I kept going on about after the death experience in 1987. God is so real. God is so real. And it was best that God had me in the hospital for 18 days after the second surgery. After I had died and they had to rush me back in for more surgery to figure out what was causing my cardiac arrests. And I came out of that in so much pain, permanently disabled. Didn't know it at the time, but he had slit or accidentally punctured my arachnoid membrane of the spinal cord, which gave me arachnoiditis. Accident. He was rushing, trying to save my life back in 87, that doctor was. And so, People later says, oh, you should have sued. Their insurance would have taken care of it and you would have had money for life. Well, I don't think that way. He was doing his best. Accident. And I knew all the experience with God I'd had and being sent back to fulfill my mission, to rear my children, then fulfill my mission, that this was all of God. And I think practically no matter what that surgeon would have done, this God was arranging for me. See, I didn't have to go out and take a needle and stab my arachnoid membrane myself to make me disabled so that I would suffer. God handled it all, and God's view of suffering is not our view. And my view is more in tune with God's view from learning this. It's love and suffering are intertwined. To God, it's not a horrible thing. It enhances the love. It teaches us to love. If we're open, and if we're not so sure that suffering is terrible and you do anything to not have it at any cost. And of course, if we can be healed, humans want to be healed. It's human nature. And if it's not God's way with us, then yes, if it's been discerned and it's totally a temporal kind of thing that God expects us to fight back and to get healing or do whatever to keep going, which I've tried to do anyway, to not let the arachnoiditis just taint me all over the place to the point where I'm sad and weeping or just lay here in depression or something or despair. No. These things are to make us strive all the more for God and for love of God and for love of other people also. To learn to love more so that we can pray better and be open to whatever gifts God wants to give us that will help our mission in life, whatever that mission is, besides the purpose that we're here to learn God's kind of love. So she really went, back then, that was the mindset, and priests didn't stop her. And God knew they wouldn't, because back then, they did go out, just, when they were touched by the Lord in that way, in some major way, having a deep conversion. She got it. She got the connection between love and suffering. And she wanted to show her love and offer her love through suffering. So here's some of the things she would do. And she really was plagued with what she had seen, and it really got to her. It was painful to think. And she was desperate to help those people, those souls in purgatory. See. She would throw herself into burning furnaces and there suffer great tortures for extended times. Wasn't just like, on New Year's Day jumping into the polar bear jump, where they jump into the ice cold water and in their swimsuits and then right back out. No, she would go into the furnace and stay for a while, extended times, uttering frightful cries, yet coming forth with no sign of burns upon her. In winter, she would plunge into the frozen Meuse River for hours and even days and weeks at a time, all the while praying to God and imploring his mercy. She sometimes allowed herself to be carried by the currents. This is in freezing weather. over in Belgium in winter, downriver to a mill, where the wheel whirled her round in a manner frightful to behold. Yet she never suffered any dislocations or broken bones. She was chased by dogs who bit her, even, and allowed it. Didn't stay away. Would go out and catch me if you can, I guess. But her reason, her purpose, her motivation was this intense desire to help the souls in purgatory by making reparation herself on their behalf. A very beautiful, loving of others thing to do, very selfless. But in our times, we don't do that. We don't, I suppose if God really told us or something, and it was such a great conviction that our spiritual director would say yes or go ahead. But it's now more of a situation of as my spiritual father said, do not, God will provide the suffering that he wills. So that's what we have learned now in our times. Don't go seeking sufferings for suffering's sake, just for the suffering of it. It's not the way in our time period. So, she was jailed yet again. A second time she was jailed for these incredible feats of throwing herself into the river, frozen river, or into the fiery furnace. And she moderated her approach. That's how it was put. After she was jailed a second time, doing these behaviors that caused her a lot of suffering, she moderated her approach to all this. Christina died at the Dominican convent of St. Catherine in Saint Trudin of natural causes, aged 74. The prioress there, she was staying in this convent of St. Catherine. The prioress there later testified that Christina, that despite her behavior of these levitations and different acting out of painful things that would have killed other people, Christina would humbly and fully obey any command given her by the prioress. And that follows true to form. Is obedience has always been important to God. Be it your spiritual director or your life, your own sufferings, that to be humble and to obey and not to go seeking. In my case, like I was told by my spiritual director, do not go out seeking suffering or creating suffering for yourself. There was one incident that had happened to me early one morning as I woke up. I've told you about where Jesus was standing right here by me on the bed, this bed. And he put this crucifix right down in me, this cross, right down in, big cross, right down into me. And that was something that was so powerful. It was so painful and burned all the way down in. But then it turned into this tremendous just otherworldly love that was in me. And I had for a long time this desire for that again. And finally, a spiritual director gave me permission to have that crucifix placed in me through outer means, so the second time was not supernatural, but it was my reaction. It was my saying yes to Christ. Yes, I am willing to suffer. I am willing. I've accepted the cross that you put deep into my heart. I've accepted it, and I will suffer whatever you want. And, oh, yes, you say these things. It's still hard. It's still hard. Like just how exhausted I've been. I had to really get down to brass tacks and say, okay, Lord, I'm willing for the next, whatever's next, and I'll try to get myself back up and moving again. And knowing that I will have another, possibly, who knows how many, but at least one more. There'll be one more before I die. That's a given. I got myself up. I've been doing little things around here. Not much, because I'm so in love that I don't want, I am making the overtures to Christ. And I know he told me to wait and be strong, that he would come back for me. So I have to modulate this. I can't just go full blown and just write and think and do nothing for love of Christ. I have to still take care of the temporal responsibilities until he comes and takes me with him for the final time. So I understand this, Christina, with these things, and the time period. It's a different time period. Now, if we went out harming ourselves or jumping in a frozen river intentionally, even though with all of our heart we were intent that we were making reparation for souls in purgatory, it would take a very insightful and special spiritual director to approve that and say, well, go ahead, because they would have to understand what you had experienced to make you truly do self-harm in order to suffer more. And more of the thought now is more faith. Let God provide it. Let God. She didn't wait. In other words, she was so gung-ho. She didn't wait for the gun to shoot to run the race toward the agony or the next suffering. She just charged. And she saw, I could do this, and she did it. So, but now we understand with faith, let God bring the sufferings to us that he wants or needs, because he knows best what is needed for reparation, for this, that, or the other situation, or soul, or a living person to make reparation, or for our own sins. See, God knows best what will ameliorate. And often it's love, not harm, not self-harm. But see, suffering is intertwined with love, so it will be a suffering. Love is painful. It can be very, very painful. So God knows best. Just always ask God, though. This is a shift from her time period. To have that kind of faith that we know God will give us all that we need to sanctify us and to get us to the point where we can be one with him and become as one in his pure love. And to learn to love as he loves. Knowing that God is always it's always in movement. God is always growing. So God will always be, we will never be equal with God's love. He's always expanding. The love of God, he is expansive, infinitely. And once we get to a certain level, God is always more love and more love and more love. So we're always going to be increasing in love too, learning more and more love. It's infinite. So that's exciting just in itself. But given that reality, God will know what it is to help us attain to pure love. And suffering is part of it. So, love to suffer, suffer to love. It's intertwined. Okay, so she ended up moderating her approach. It was testified later on that despite her behaviors, of doing these things, she was genuine, she was sincere about it, but misguided, her doing what she wanted, what she thought would help. It was really rather selfish in that sense of back to herself, what I think is going to help get those people, make reparation for those souls in purgatory and help ease their suffering. She had the right idea of wanting to help and changing her life. She became very focused on God and very loving, very religious, very spiritually open to God, but was still using her mind, separated from what God's will was. So that's what we need to do, is ask God and ask him to help us always to do his will, with whatever penances, with whatever fasting, with whatever. And feel free to think of I haven't gone over everything, but it's just been one suffering after another. So God is providing me with what I can do, even if I'm not thinking about it. I try to have a good attitude, but I might not even know who or what or that at all. Might be so consumed with the suffering that I'm just thinking, how am I going to get through this or something? Oh, thank you, Lord. By the grace of God, I'll get through it. But, it's not as if, see, that the cause and effect isn't all fulfilled in me yet. I'm still here. If I end up having the intestinal surgery, maybe there'll be an infection with it. But I'm not going to do anything to cause an infection. I am at death's door every single day and night with my intestines, having a gut attack again. So I take these pills, and I take more and more of them because they keep losing effect, but they cause they cause a reaction and will help clear things out. So, but I do that because it's not up to me to decide not to use the means that are given me. In other words, to do like a stealthy assisted suicide or something by not taking those pills, even though they aren't doing what the drug company says they're supposed to do, which is block opiate receptors. No. At least with me, it's just a very heavy-duty laxative. And now, not heavy enough, I have to take more. The body adapted to it. So that's how I also know, because if we're doing the receptive blocking, it wouldn't be that way, where you adapt and then you have to take more and more and more. This is a different function that it's actually doing. So, or maybe it's the allergic reaction function, but whatever. The drug company's making out big on these pills that they tout have this special quality. So, anyway, but it's a lot of it's motive, and a lot of it is letting God decide when it's our time to die. He'll know, because otherwise, see, then we will have to go through more suffering to learn more pure love. Remember the 9 S's, the suffering and the selflessness. Selflessly offer yourself to God and let Him be the one to determine what penances or even what is our mission at any given day or hour or moment. And to know that we're in progression too. Like the miserable souls in purgatory are in progression, because they didn't learn what they had an opportunity to learn on earth. God forbid that is us. That's why we need to educate ourselves and learn from other people, and also learn and recognize why things shifted in different time periods to become more precise and more in tune with what God wills and wants. Even though before she was so sincere and genuine and really moved, and far better that she probably, caused herself sufferings than just being resistant to anything and not having that experience of seeing heaven and hell and purgatory affect her at all, or come out of it and say, that's just silliness. I was having an out-of-body dream or a fantasy or something. It's not real. It's not true. There is no, this or that. So, see, that's not good at all. That's the devil getting to you. To not have faith and to not see the connections in these things. That's, it just slows down your progression and your learning to love is what it does. So, and some people are, born with a very loving disposition too. You guys, a lot of you viewers are born with that. Whether you're in a church or not, some of you have this innate disposition of tremendous ability to love. And so God will bring whatever to help enhance that even more. Sufferings. A lover die, a spouse die, parents or something that were beloved, different things happening, different ailments, whatever it is, or accident. I've read about this father of 3 children and a wife. He was a lacrosse coach at a college somewhere in the east part of the United States. And he was up on a ladder, not that much, maybe putting up Christmas lights on his house for his family's delight and other people's delight. And he fell off the ladder and had a terrible head injury and didn't survive. So he's, there's that situation. We don't know why, do we? So Christina Mirabilis, She was jailed a second time. What else here? Let me get my glasses adjusted here. Doesn't really say a lot more here, other than people can get want to really get into the details of Christina's legacy and veneration, of appreciating her life and her body. The Catholic Church allows and recognizes venerations of saints upheld by the laity. Canonization is understood as a reaffirming of the more notable examples of Christian life as mentioned in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and Saint Christina the Astonishing. Having early church recognition is due her title of saint as stated by the church magisteriums, sacred and sacred. So, while Christina the Astonishing, see if this is still on, has never been formally approved by the Catholic Church, that's okay, don't have to be approved, there remains a strong devotion to her in her native region of Limburg. Prayers are traditionally said and asking Christina to seek protection, seek God's intercession to help them pray for millers, for those suffering from mental illness, and for mental health workers. Well, now why would they have that be for millers, a special connection? A lot of success with her prayers for millers. Well, because how she would float down or let the current take her down this freezing river current to the mill that's downstream, with it going round and round, its big paddles, to help move the stone. It's all Fulcrum's physics system of the big wheel with the water causing it to churn. To move in one direction causes other mechanisms inside the little mill house to turn, which causes a huge grindstone that oftentimes donkeys would also be inside helping move it to turn, so that the grain would be crushed and milled into flour to bake bread for survival. So that's what went on in Limburg. And so the prayers she was a patron of millers, of those depressed, and those mentally ill. Well, why the mentally ill? Because many people accused her of being mentally ill, because she was so different. And after she had the seizure, even though it was epileptic seizure, many people didn't know what that was then, or maybe none of them. But that's now what, and for years has been considered to be the cause of her seizures that she would have off and on. So I'll learn more from this longer writing of her and report back. But hopefully some of these things have been good information for your own life. You're all called by God to become pure love in Him at some point in time. Have that divine union and become one with God, who is pure love. So for now, we can be practicing loving God above everything else, loving others and loving ourselves as God loves, not as humanity loves, not as the temporal world loves, not as even people that you may admire and have wonderful volunteer or paid positions in a church or even a priest says or anything. Love as God loves, his pure love. That's what we aim for. Aim for the top. Aim for what God wants. He wants us all at some point, either, after a long time in this life or at the point of death or in when we're progressing, to eventually come to that point of divine union with him, he who is pure love. So pure love's the be all and the end all, in other words. And let us try to think of anything that says, oh, we shouldn't do that. Shouldn't purely love. If everyone purely loved God, others, and selves, we wouldn't need any kind of news organizations other than reporting love, on all the love, and though suffering. There will always be that in the temporal. But in heaven, no, because we will all be pure love then. In the temporal, not all are. And we aren't all pure love. So we don't see suffering as God sees it, as a help, a present help in times of trouble can be. Because through suffering, we love more. We love God more, for one thing. Anyone who believes in God sure will. There's a trouble or a trial or a heartbreak or a sickness or whatever the case may be of suffering. Cry out unto God. Cast your cares upon the Lord, and he will take care of thee. That's in Psalm 52 or 55. It's in many other verses. And I think Paul has paraphrased it, and it's just in various places in Scripture. And it's universal because it's a truth. It's a high truth, I would call it, a pure truth. The truth that is directly connected to God is pure love. All right, have fun. Have fun with all this. It's very liberating, I think, to learn from these mystics and to see how things have changed as far as any kind of creating our own suffering intentionally. We generally often are the cause of our own suffering by our mistakes and not listening enough to God, to the nudges or whatever. I had that nudge with the tissue, would have saved me a lot of hassle. And I didn't keep seeking further. I thought I had it. And I did look a little bit, then I thought, oh no, it's just the one, And no, I was being told, just in little ways, God's always, miracles all the time. God's always protecting us and trying to help us out in little tangible temporal ways. So consider what he does when we're in tune and desiring of his spiritual ways of love and of God being pure love and wanting to be one in him so that we too may purely love and help lift up the world in massive ways far into eternity, forever and ever. What's better than that? I really can't think of anything greater than love of God and becoming pure love in God, who is pure love.